Hi, so we're going to do a couple of videos about mediums of art. And I'll just jump right in and show you some slides. I want to talk about drawing first. And when I say mediums of art, I mean different disciplines of art, like drawing and painting and printmaking and sculpture. And all these different mediums of art, even beyond what I just listed, they're not mutually exclusive. So we see a lot of intermixture of the different mediums of art. But drawing is certainly the primary means of human expression. So sort of the first type of art that was made was drawings, most widely utilized as well. And drawing is prevalent in human culture, both past and present. So elements of drawing are found in many other artistic mediums. And it's a two-dimensional art form, happens on a flat surface. And drawing materials mainly create the elements line and value, which in turn form other elements and, of course, the principles. And drawing and line go hand in hand, of course. So this is a painting of a bull, a drawing and a painting, essentially, from Chavot Cave from about 30,000 years ago. And drawing materials like charcoal and chalk and graphite, like pencil, are called dry media. So they attach themselves to surfaces via mechanical means. So the surface actually holds the media in pits and grooves. So if you look really closely at a piece of paper, you see it's not smooth. It's got little pits in there. And this is why a pencil won't work on glass. There's no little pits for it to get collected in. And then we've got something like ink, which is called a wet media. That means that there is a little bit of distinction between drawing and painting, but it fades as well. You can use ink for drawing or painting, obviously. Ink is more likely to work on a smooth surface than a dry surface, but it will certainly work on both. So some examples of dry materials would be charcoal, Conte crown, and pencil. So willow or vine charcoal is literally burnt twigs. And that's where the first charcoal came from, was burnt tree twigs. It's burnt carbon, essentially, a soft quality and a somewhat delicate, really. These break really, really easily. Vine and willow charcoal, they're really delicate and they're really light. So work like this was made with charcoal from burnt wood, varying degrees of hardness by the wood used. And then we've got compressed charcoal. So this is powdered charcoal that is compressed and bound with gum arabic. So that's a tree sap, which is also what binds watercolor, or another binder. Generally darker and less delicate than fine charcoal. It's a lot heavier when you hold it in your hand. So here's a Picasso drawing done with charcoal. And then we've got Conte crown, which is powdered charcoal or graphite or ochre or iron oxide compressed with clay. It's got hardness like compressed charcoal, maybe even harder, um, but it's available in a range of colors. And later on, this is the same method that is used to develop pastels as we know them today, and then even crayons. I used to make kind of yellow ochre colors, sepia to red to brown and even black, of course, because it's based on charcoal. And pencils are made from powdered graphite and clay, and they range in hardness and darkness, as you've probably seen before. And they all have numbers on them. So we want to see, what do those numbers mean? Um, so you know a 2B pencil from school, obviously. And here's how it lays out. We've got hardness to blackness or softness. On the far left, we've got F for fine. And then it goes too hard, hard, HB, B, 2B, 3B, 4B, 5B, and so on. Um, And so the idea with having a 2B or a B pencil is that that's kind of right in the middle of the scale. So there's a balance between hardness and softness and blackness. But artists use a whole range of these. If they want something really dark, they'll use even up to an 8B. And then for really fine drawing, you would use an F or one of the H pencils. Here's a video you should watch about how pencils are made. There's going to be a lot of videos linked to in this lecture. And crayons too. So I want to give you a note on paper. And most artists' material now is called archival. That means it's acid-free. It won't yellow like newspaper, so it's not acidic. And so there's types of paper, which are archival and non-archival. And some artists like to use handmade papers, however, for its characteristics, its softness, or its tactile feeling. Um, so a lot of the reason when you see really old drawings and they look yellow is because of this. They've turned yellow over time. They didn't start off as yellow. So paper all was handmade back in the day. So here are videos showing you the differences between the two. I've made paper before. It's really, really cool. It takes a really long time. So the automated paper we see today is obviously what we would use for printers and the such like that. Handmade paper is really beautiful. Purposes of drawing, personal notation, sketch, record, or document, kind of anything really. Study for larger works or more complex works. Building, or storyboards for films. And as an end in itself. So the final project could be a drawing. Here's a really cool video by William Kentridge. He makes drawings that are animations as well. So he'll do a drawing and use that as one of the stills in a video. And then he'll directly erase things on that same drawing and take another picture of it, go in and rework it, take another picture of it, rework it, take another picture of it, put all those stills together, and then get a video out of the whole thing. Raphael sketches. Turned into this. Picasso, we've seen this painting before. Started off as sketches showing the movement that's going to happen, the general shapes that are going to happen in the final painting. So we can call these thumbnail sketches, just little sketches kind of mapping out the way things are going to go. Why? To develop ideas, test compositions, gain a visual and structural understanding of the subject, and maybe even problem solve without the complexity or even cost of other materials like paint and color. Paint is expensive compared to a pencil, a lot more expensive. There are tubes of oil paint that you can buy for $100 or more, but a pencil might cost less than $1, right? And we know what this is: contour lines, incisive, clean lines that define edges. Not really an outline per se, because we've got lines that come into the figure, into the form. We know all about this. We've got cross contour as well. We can really map out the form of something using cross contour drawing. sort of tracing the surface of objects, emphasizing the spatial changes across a form. So how does space change across the form? It's a really clinical way of drawing with lines. And the whole line kind of travels around the form. We used to do these in college and trying to do a single line that goes all the way around the entire drawing is exceedingly difficult. I could never get it just right. More example of contour drawing. Hokusai, which is most famous to us because of the wave block print. Picasso again. Marie Cassatt. Was that Matisse, the last one? So this one's a little different, right? So we've got some contour happening, and that's kind of breaking into some gestural work. So you know this, that most gestural work shows movement. So really suited towards showing figures and transitory gestures. There's some types of gesture drawing. So drawing for mass and line, for just line. Scribbled lines, right? This whole drawing is made out of scribbled lines. And sort of a sustained gesture. And this is kind of like when we were talking about cross contour, but a lot less clean. So something like this is something we would do in like 3 minutes in a drawing class. So same subject, but different takes on it or her. It's also about making value, though. Drawing is not all just contour or scratchy gestural marks. And remember from atmospheric perspective that the objects that appear closest to you have the greatest contrast happening. So you see that arm close to us with the black around the forearm really appears closer to us, while the shadow and shade on that further away leg is much more subtle. More crisp and dynamic up front. So we can use some methods with just line to make shadow and shade. And this would be something we would use when we can't use like graphite to smudge to make shading. And so this is a technique that could be used just on paper, but kind of has to be used in printmaking, where you can only sort of gouge out lines in order to indicate changes in value. So if you look really closely, all the lines in something like this are through this type of shading. And maybe you did this before in high school, but you can see that we can add darkness through density. So over on the left, we've got the contour drawing. Over on on the right, we've got a lot of value happening through shading. A lot happening in these drawings by Jay DeFeo. So these areas that have the most gradating values from black to grade white appear the most dynamically 3D. So like that swim goggle that is closest to us appears to have the most 3D form to it. I think this is a camera tripod. So you can see up at the mount, it's very well detailed, and it also has a lot of contrast of value happening up there. And that brings us to a word called chiaroscuro. And that's an Italian word meaning light to dark. And that's where we see all this contrast happening and beginning to happen to make these really very lifelike, naturalistic images. Um, it's really pushing those values to make things look very, very naturalistic. Gradations of light and shade rather than just line alone. And here's a video about that. We've seen this slide before about how light is depicted and captured versus its shaded areas. How subtle this is, mostly darkness. This is one of my drawings. These are the guys who are setting up the first atomic bomb blast. So a little bit of a scary situation, but very subdued and looks pretty calm. But I used a lot of chiaroscuro, and you can really tell right where the guys are up by the truck, and you can really tell the changes from black to white to really make the figures pop out there. And drawing really took off when, in the Renaissance, paper became more readily available and has survived. Um, so paper doesn't last forever, obviously, except for some examples of papyrus. But papyrus is really not good for making fine lines. It's a really rough kind of paper. But paper as we know it really started to take off in the Renaissance. Now, I will say, though, that in China and Japan, paper was way earlier than this, a lot earlier. But the sort of naturalistic drawing that we see starting in the Renaissance happened then. We don't see as much naturalistic work from Japan and China until later on. A lot of this Renaissance work, um, we see anatomical studies as interest in science increases. So people want to know what people are made out of. Here's a cool video about his materials. More videos. Studies of the shoulder and neck, the muscles and bones. So the beginning of medical illustration. And in Renaissance, we also saw portraiture emerge, specifically self-portraiture. I mean, this is when people first had the guts to draw a picture of themselves rather than somebody else. Which kind of goes against what we talked about earlier with Renaissance work. Um, this is still idealized, but it's not for the church or for the state. So this is why this is interesting to see self-portraiture at the same time as what we've talked about before. It's another study. More videos, Raphael drawings. And then, drawing goes on with the other paths and artistic styles, towards Romanticism, Rembrandt. I really dig drawings like this and the figures and characters like this. We saw Turner's paintings when we were talking about Romanticism, and he made drawings as well. And this is a big, cool drawing, everything being depicted and the space being shown. And look how abstract that looks. So ahead of its time. Expressionism, Van Gogh, of course. The one on the upper right is my favorite. Here's the Carpenter. This one is just so packed full of emotion. Another Van Gogh. This one's way cool too. So he used a lot of the scratchy lines. A Study for the Starry Night. Surrealism. We saw De Chirico with the girl on the street that I thought was a really mysterious drawing or painting, and it was called Mystery on a Street. But we see surrealism happening in his drawings. And Jean Dubuffet, full-on abstraction with drawing materials. So I want you to watch this video for sure. She does some crazy drawing. One of my colleagues does some awesome drawings. This is video from a show of hers. And this is a movie just for fun. Okay, that is it, and I'll see you next time.